down.
I'd like to begin by asking Mr. Lane this. It is widely alleged that sinister forces who have a vested interest in suppressing the real truth as to the identity of the assassin have been here and there killing off crucial people, former strippers at Ruby's joint in Dallas, truck driver roommates of friends of Oswald, that kind of thing. How come, if you were the man who has changed history, these forces haven't bumped you off, Mr. Lane?
Well, I think, fortunately, we haven't come to that. I would like to comment, if I may, upon portions of your introduction. It is not just liberals and leftists who cannot accept the Warren Commission report. Of course, I think the very best review and most favorable review, which my book received, was in your publication, the National Review.
I was talking about your pre-Kennedy reputation. By way of background.
Before the assassination.
Yes, sir.
When I was elected to the
state legislature. There was an assassination, wasn't there?
Yes, when I was elected, there's no question about that. When I was elected to the state legislature with the endorsement and support of President Kennedy. That's the left liberal approach you're talking about. In terms of the assassination, though, in terms of the Warren report, of course, the Lou Harris poll shows now that 2/3 of the American people indicate that they cannot accept its conclusions. So I think that it's not even an unpopular cause with which I'm associated any longer. And regarding the earlier comments you made, I think the best way to respond to them is probably with the opening line of your book, which I'm afraid I may butcher because I'll just paraphrase it. But it was something like, when you are a controversialist, you can either go mad or ignore genuinely unjust criticism. And I prefer, as you do, the latter course.
Wow.
That was fun.
Oh, it gets better. I mean, I recommend everybody watch the entire thing. It's two of the great minds of the 60s going at each other on live television. I mean, not only that, I mean, there's cultural angles to it. There's the WASP versus the Jew. There's the old money versus whatever Mark Lane represents. There's also the fact that unbeknownst to Mark Lane at the time, Buckley is CIA. And he's just coy as a snake, Buckley. Just completely slithering at times in this interview. Absolutely fantastic. We're showing a little clip at the top of the interview there where he is berating him about his early career. And they're both the extreme ends of the political spectrum. There's that. And they're totally civil. And one of the best things about it is the civility, Eric.
Which is, it's kind of fun though, but they're toying with each other.
There's one joke that goes over Buckley's head, and Lane says, I thought you didn't get that. He goes, no, I got it. But he didn't acknowledge it. I mean, and Lane is kind of, upset that he didn't acknowledge the joke. It was so subtle. And he goes, no, I got it. But anyway, that's after the book comes out. This is obviously after the release of the Rush to Judgment book and the movie, which is 66, 67. And everywhere he goes, Lane, he's being followed by FBI agents. Even in 1964, during the Warren Commission, as he's speaking, and the Warren Commission has not released the report yet, everywhere he goes, he's, unbeknownst to him, followed by the FBI, who are filing reports in real time and sending them to the Warren Commission about Mark Lane while they are investigating the assassination, which sounds insane, but absolutely true.
You think he didn't know? I mean, he seems to.
He said he didn't know. He said he had no idea.
A lot of it. So,
well, again, he's hinting about why you're still alive. Years later, in 1991, he would get a call from a guy on the phone. This is in the 90s. Lane kept a folder of death threats that got so large he eventually gave up and had to throw it out. So he just couldn't, this in the 90s, he just threw the whole folder out because it was so big, he didn't have room for it anymore. But in the 90s, he got a call from a guy who said, You're going to go to Chicago. And his next trip was to go to Chicago. It's in New York. Gets a call. He goes, going to go to Chicago, and you're going to stay at such and such a hotel. And they're going to give you room and number, whatever. And he said, you're going to go into that room, and then you're going to come out, and you're going to cross the street to go to this meeting that you're having, this speaking engagement, and you're going to get hit by a truck. And then he goes, what? He says, how do you know that? He says, because I'm supposed to drive the truck. And he says, what? He says, that's my assignment. He said, I just can't kill an American on American soil. I'm sorry. And he goes to Chicago, goes to the hotel. They assign him room 312. They assign him the room that the guy said he would be assigned, which had wiretaps in it. So they had already gotten, that arranged. And when he crossed the street, he went around the corner and walked 10 blocks so he wouldn't cross right in front of the hotel. No. I mean, he wasn't an idiot. But I mean, there were definitely death threats and attempts on his life. Let me put it that way. They had a time he went to Austria. He was speaking in Vienna, and they had a translator. The State Department sent a translator, and the translator was intentionally mistranslating his speech in real time. So American students were there and said, "What the hell is this?" And they stood up and started translating into German and French and other languages for the members of the audience.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that weird? I mean, they went to so many sneaky levels to undermine him, which we'll get into in the show. The famous documents that the CIA put out creating the term conspiracy theorist for him, and how their Operation Mockingbird peons should handle it. I mean, they go into some detail. You got to give it to the CIA. Even Lane talks about it in his books. When he got the documents under the Freedom of Information Act years later, and he read the amount of detail that the CIA went into on how to undermine Mark Lane in the media. I mean, they spell it out. And we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. But I wanted to go back in time to where Mark Lane began his career. This career is so enormous, so large, so crazy, that I was reading Jim DiEugenio's obituary on him, and he was reading the autobiography, and he said he had no idea just how vast of a career this was. And I had no idea either. There's stuff I had no clue about. We're going to try to get into it. This is non-Kennedy stuff, but this is about Mark Lane, and the bulk of it, of his career, is obviously made famous by the JFK assassination, but there's so much more to it than I ever had any idea about. I mean, this goes back, let's go back to the guy's born in the Bronx, 1927, moves to Brooklyn. He goes to high school, goes to, I think, to Erasmus, I forget which school, or James Madison, I think. And he's raised in Brooklyn. He goes to Brooklyn Law School when he gets out of World War II. But in World War II, he catches the very end of World War II just because of his age. And it's kind of like the occupation time of Germany, like 45, 46, is when he's in Austria. And he takes an intelligence test, and they assign him to the intelligence unit simply because his IQ was off the charts. So he says, all right. So what does he do? He starts investigating war crimes by the Americans. And they go, you're an idiot. Get out of here. They send him back to the United States, to Brooklyn. He's obviously a Brooklyn Dodger fan, which is the right thing to do at the time. He goes to Brooklyn Law School, gets out. Keep in mind, folks, this guy is the original liberal. He is the closest thing I could think would be Alan Dershowitz, would be the equivalent of Mark Lane. And I believe that if Mark Lane was alive today, that he would be Dershowitz 2.0 in terms of defending Trump and other things, because he was such a pure civil rights attorney in that regard. You know what I mean? But at the times they were then what they were then. And he was a man of his times. And the times were radically different than they are today. So when he gets out of law school, he sets up a law firm in an apartment building on the second floor of a tenement in East Harlem. And there his clients are all Puerto Ricans and people who are down on their luck, and he begins defending them for no money. That's how he gets out of law school. And he, for the first time, he says these people finally have a voice. A guy comes to him, this kid, this is in 1951, by the way. He has this law practice, and half of it is pro bono. But a kid comes to him, some kid escapes from a place called Wasaic State School for the Mental Defective. I mean, think about the name. And apparently it's like a reform school, Eric. But it was a state-run reform school. And this was the equivalent of what Geraldo did, going into the mental hospital that made Geraldo famous. This kid who escaped Wasaic told Mark Lane the horrific nature of what was going on in there, that it was really a prison. And he contacted 2 or 3 friends in the media. They did a massive expose on this Mosaic state school for the mentally defective, and it was eventually closed down because of Mark Lane. He then starts, this is insane, he then starts a drug treatment program in East Harlem. For people who don't understand, East Harlem is AKA Spanish Harlem. It is the eastern portion in New York and the upper Manhattan of Harlem that has historically been Latino, Puerto Rican for the most part. Now, obviously, it's completely gentrified and there's different nationalities in there. But back in that day, it was called Spanish Harlem. And it was the South Bronx, if that makes any sense to anybody, but right below it. And what Mark Lane does is he sets up a drug treatment program that never existed before. And they treat 25,000 drug addicts over the course of time. And he turns it over to the drug addicts to run once they got clean. And he wipes his hands of that project. Like, he creates projects and then he wipes his hands of them and launches them off. He begins to, the National Lawyers Guild, to raise money for these different causes. He books different acts like Pete Seeger in Carnegie Hall. And he believes that he's going to be the next Bill Graham or the first Bill Graham. He wants to be a concert promoter. He even though he's doing this for social events to raise money for causes, he kind of likes it. And he thinks, hey, you know what? I could do this. So he hooks up with Jackie Robinson, the Dodger, the great Dodger. And I think it was in 1957, he invites a minister to come and speak in the street, because he doesn't have an auditorium. And it's Martin Luther King. 1957, Martin Luther King speaking in East Harlem, and he plugs in to get electricity for the PA into the nightclub of Sugar Ray Robinson, which is on that street, like right there. He runs an extension cord into Sugar Ray Robinson, the famous boxer. You never got me down, Jake. You never got me down. That boxer, he had a nightclub and gym, and they plugged into there. So in 1959, he forms the Reform Democratic Party, Mark Lane. Why does he do that? Because New York, as I've said in previous episodes, especially about the one about the mayors in New York, was corrupt. It was still run by Tammany Hall, if you could believe that. Tammany Hall had extensions decades into the 50s from the 1920s. The mayor and the Democratic Party in New York was totally corrupt. So he begins to form what he called the Reform Democratic Party. And who helps him do this? A guy he's campaigning for, number one, Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of the late president, and the brother of the guy he campaigns for, Bobby Kennedy. So he's the campaign manager. Ironically, in 1959, here's a photo of the two of them. That's Mark Lane as the campaign manager. Now, nationally, the campaign manager was Bobby Kennedy, but I'm talking about in New York State. Right. Yeah, so Mark Lane becomes the campaign manager. Now, Mark Lane also runs simultaneously doing this for the New York State Assembly, and he wins. And he vows to do it for one term, and get out and turn it over to a Puerto Rican, because he says it's their district. Now, the district that he represents happens to be Yorkville, all the way up to East Harlem. So Yorkville is extremely white and German, and he lives there. But up above is East Harlem, Spanish Harlem, which is what he really wants to have representation of. So he vows to run for one term and help the guy handpick a successor and become the campaign manager of that guy, which is what he does. While he's in the state assembly, he fights for, he's a one-issue guy, and that's anti-death penalty. That's his thing. And it'll come to bear later in this episode as to how that is paid off. In the meantime, he goes on this thing called the Freedom Rides. And the Freedom Rides is not an amusement park. He is the only elected official to ever be arrested in the Freedom Rides to Mississippi. He goes down with a guy named, this is him actually arrested in Jackson, Mississippi. He's arrested for sitting next to a guy who came down with him in the bus station named Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton will later, many years later, become the borough president of Manhattan, if I remember correctly, to my New York friends. I think Percy Sutton became the borough president. In fact, I think Percy Sutton was involved, and this is a side note, was involved in helping Obama get into Columbia University via the scholarship from the Saudis. That's a story for another day. Anyway, so Percy Sutton and him are arrested in Jackson, Mississippi. He's the first elected official to ever be arrested as a freedom rider. And in 61, after his term, 62, his term's up, he helps this Puerto Rican guy, Santangelo, I think it was, possibly someone else, become the next assemblyman from the district. And he runs for Congress in 1962 and loses in the primary, Democratic primary. I forget where he came in. But that's the end of his political career in office, kind of speak, you know, because he doesn't, oh, no, in 68, in 68, he is the vice presidential candidate for with Dick Gregory at the top of the ticket for the infamous Peace and Freedom Party, which asked me and Timothy Leary years later to run as a ticket. So that's some weird connection. But he gets about 50,000 votes. I think they're on about 8 to 12 state ballots. I forget the exact number. It wasn't 50 states, but they did get about 50,000 votes, him and Dick Gregory. And him and Dick Gregory become lifelong friends. They'll work together. They'll write a book together about the Martin Luther King assassination. But December 19th, well, this is a month after the assassination. The assassination happens in November 22nd, 1963. And December 19th, he will send a letter to the Warren Commission. Why is he sending a letter to the Warren Commission? He wants to represent the late Lee Harvey Oswald as his attorney. And they go, there's no way. He loses his mind, Earl Warren. In fact, Lewis, this is great. The president of the American Bar Association is a guy named Lewis Powell. Now, this is a great photo. Lewis Powell, this is for Barnes. Lewis Powell wants Mark Lane disbarred for writing an article that was published by the National Guardian, which is him laying out his case against Henry Wade, the DA of Dallas. That's how deep state and how censorial the justices would be. This is before Justice Powell becomes Justice Powell on the United States Supreme Court. He was president of the ABA, and he wants Mark Lane disbarred. Just think about that for a second, for raising a question about the Oswald and the assassination and writing an article. So he writes this article, and it's Oswald Innocent, a lawyer's brief. He called it a brief, and nobody will publish it. New York Post, Daily News, Life Magazine, goes to every single one. They tell him, forget it. No way, no how, nowhere is anyone going to publish this on the planet Earth. And it's just, there's no speculation. There's no speculation. He was not speculative in the book Rush to Judgment. He didn't speculate about anything till years later into the 90s with his CIA books. But Rush to Judgment has absolutely no speculation in it. There's a cover of the first one. Now I just want to get into this for a second, because nobody will publish the book. Nobody will publish the article that becomes the book. The article finally gets published by the National Guardian. And the National Guardian is to the far left of the nation. It is so far left that it takes its marching orders from the Soviets, right? But he just wants to get the article published, and he doesn't care about that, which is true. So they publish the article, and it just flies off the newsstand, the edition that it's in. It's a weekly newspaper.
Sure.
And they have to keep reprinting it. It goes absolutely haywire. It goes viral, as you kids would say today. And he had written to, as I said, he wrote to the Warren Commission December 7th. The article's published December 19th. And now he's got the FBI up his ass. Okay. The FBI had already gone to the publishers of the different newspapers and told them not to publish the articles of Mark Lane. Now, there is no articles of Mark Lane. There's nothing. He has no past. There's nothing. He's just a politician, lawyer from New York, who's, you know, a liberal. I mean, there's really, he's not a commie.
A quote unquote gadfly lawyer in his obituary.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, the mainstream media, especially Anthony Lewis of New York Times, despised Mark Lane, and he was them politically. Only they were phony versions of him politically. They were deep state Mockingbird operatives. He didn't know this at the time, but later through FOIA, he will receive 7 FBI files that were just on him alone from the 1964 period of time, just on him, which is kind of unbelievably insane. So Oswald is dead. The Warren Commission, Earl Warren says, no way does a dead man need a lawyer. We're not going to do that. And how dare you even ask? Well, a couple of days later, after thinking it over, the Warren Commission gets the head of the ACLU, some deep state stooge, to represent Oswald in the commission hearings. Never says a word, but they realized that Mark Lane had found an Achilles heel and they wanted to cover their tracks. So they got this guy from the ACLU, the president, to just sit there and be a stooge. And then he gets a letter from Marguerite Oswald, which is how we got to the Mark Lane episode. Marguerite Oswald reads the article in the National Guardian from December 19th, 1963, and she writes a letter to Mark Lane. Are you willing to defend my son? That's how it got the ball rolling. He can't defend the son, her son. They won't let him, but he can defend her, and he could do it pro bono, and that's what he does. Before the book comes out, he begins to, this is him with her, I guess, when he's getting into Dallas. She is so smart that she's able to see through all of this horseshit of what they were trying to do. They had showed her a picture of that phony Oswald down in Mexico City and said, is this your son? And she said, of course it's not my son. And she says, I don't know who this is. And I don't know why you're even asking me this question. But as Mark Lane will famously say, which we'll get into in a couple of minutes, Mexico City is the Rosetta Stone of the Kennedy assassination. And every assassination researcher who is been doing this a long time agrees with Mark Lane. Mark Lane is the original gangster of JFK researchers. There's nobody before Mark Lane. Now, you could say Sylvia Mega put together some things, and so did Penn Jones, no doubt about it. But I'm talking about a guy who actually testified and tortured the Warren Commission, who actually wrote the first internationally published best-selling book, the guy who did all of this stuff for everybody, for every assassination, for every conspiracy, for every single thing where you questioned authority, questioned the United States government on the assassinations, led to the Church Committee. All roads were created by one man, a guy named Mark Levin, who parents changed his name to Lane, but it had nothing to do with him in the 1920s because they were far left, and I think they wanted to escape any Trotskyite connections. But originally, his name was Levin. But there already is a Mark Levin, right? There's
nowadays on Fox.
Right. It would have been confusing if he had
very confusing. Right, politics are not the same.
I know. I'm glad he changed it. But anyway, he begins to write this book, but he doesn't have a publisher. Everybody turns him down. Why do they turn him down? Because the FBI pays them a visit and says, don't give this guy a publishing deal. And they go, okay, thank you. So he goes to England and he finds, again, the Bodie Head is the name of the publisher. And my British friends know what the Bodie Head is. It's the oldest publishing company. It goes back to the 1860s, 1880s in London. Bodie Head is, I presume, the deep state publishing company of UK. However, that being said, they decide to give him a contract. Why do they give him a contract? They have plans of their own, the scheming British weasels. All of a sudden, he begins to go over there to write the book in London, and a guy shows up and he says, you know, I will help you with this book. I know publishing, and I will work with you pro bono for free. I am an editor. I work at, and he was. And the guy, if you look him up, I think there's a picture of him over there named Sonnenberg, which I sent you him. He wrote a book called Memoirs of a Bad Boy, Lost Property, years later. This guy Sonnenberg is so deep state. He's kind of like a George Plimpton, Eric. I think I sent you a copy of the book cover from called Lost Property. Sonnenberg, what's that?
I gotta look for it.
Okay. Sonnenberg volunteers to work with Mark Lane. And years later, when he writes his own memoir, he admits that at the time he was working for the CIA to report to them every paragraph and every page of the book, not the FBI. This is the CIA now. And the reason I mention it, it's because it's the first appearance of the CIA to enter the picture of the storyline here. So Sonnenberg, actually, he's Sonnenberg Jr. His father was the head Sonnenberg. And that guy, the kid, is just like a playboy who goes around the world and partying and doing stuff, which is the perfect setup for a CIA operative. So he's fired by Mark Lane, who sniffs out something being wrong here with the guy's work. And Mark Lane continues to write the rest of the book. It will become unusual to Mark Lane because the situation with the book, the CIA gets the galleys of the book before Mark Lane does. And he was embittered about this, Eric. And he learns this years later when he sees his file through Freedom of Information Act that the CIA is already reading his book before Holt and Winston Holt Reinhardt will pick it up in New York, by the way, to make money because the book sells through the roof. And that is Rush to Judgment. Oh, yeah, here it is. Ben Sonnenberg, Confessions of a Bad Boy. I believe that looks like around, I want to say like 81st Street, Central Park West, if my eyeballs can see that building back there. I think that's part of the Museum of Natural History. But yeah, this cat, scurrilous secret agent type, working to undermine or do the bidding of the CIA, or a lot of times it's MI5. We're going to get into a guy later. His name is Christopher Andrew. And my British friends know who Christopher Andrew is. He's a famous historian who is MI5 over there. And he's in one of these colleges where he runs the history department. But he will be the author of a book called The Sword and the Shield in 1999. And the reason I'm mentioning that now, it's a Soviet defector who comes to England claiming he has all these files memorized. He has no files in his hands. And he writes a book with this guy. And this guy, Andrew, in the never-ending undermining of the Soviet Union, claims that the KGB paid Mark Lane to write the book. So Mark Lane goes berserk and says that obviously this is a lie, but you can't undersell how dedicated MI5 is to linking anything to the Soviets. This is 1999 that the book comes out, and the KGB agent has left. It's not really a defection, it's just the collapse of the Soviet Union, and he's trying to get a book deal based on his previous work in the KGB, put it that way. But it's kind of an interesting story because Mark Lane goes public saying, I never took a nickel from anyone, except I took $50 from an obscure guy named Woody Allen, who sent him a check for $50 to, is kind of a super chat to keep him going. I mean, he could have made millions and millions of dollars, Mark Lane, if he was an attorney for the wealthy, which he wasn't, of course. So, I mean, he's a William Kunstler type, and those guys are never rich. The money they make, they usually donate to their different causes that they're involved in. But anyway, there he is. Doesn't he look kind of honest?
Dapper.
This is, what's that?
He looks dapper.
Yeah, he's dapper. That's MI5's. You know, this is the boss of James Bond, trying to link Mark Lane's book to the Soviets, as does the CIA to try to link it to the Soviets. And part of the reason that I mentioned, and Mark Lane mentions, that Mexico City is the Rosetta Stone of the Kennedy assassination, it's because the David Atlee Phillips and the others who are plotting to create this situation with Oswald link the assassination to Kostakov, who's in the Soviet embassy in Mexico City, who's in charge of assassinations. They fraudulently create this frame job of Oswald in late September, which we'll get into in a little while. But here it is, 1999, and this British douchebag is trying to still hang this Soviet thing around Lane's neck, which I found to be just absolutely telling of how the Soviets and the Brits just locked in this death struggle. And that's what caused the Ukraine war. But that being said, that's a story for another day.
I have
Anyways,
a clip of Mark Lane talking briefly about that. Do you want that
oh
now?
yeah,
or do you
let's
want it
go.
later?
Oh, sure. No, let me hear it. Let me hear it.
I found this earlier.
That's what they told Earl Warren and scared him. It really was frightened by this. The problem is the story was a fabrication. Oswald had not been to Mexico City. The person who designed that whole story was a man named David Atlee Phillips, who ran the Central Intelligence Agency for the entire hemisphere from his office in Mexico City. And not long before he died, last several years ago, he said, he spoke at USC, and I was on the program with him. And he said that, in fact, Oswald never was in Mexico City.
Okay, well, you
Which
could cut it right
destroyed-
there, because I wanted to explain that. It's not just a couple of years ago. It's 1977. This is obviously at the end of Mark's life here.
Sure.
It's about 2008 or something when his last book came out. But
That's
in
2013.
2013, he dies a year later. So, it's 2016. Dies like 3 years later. But nevertheless, the important part is the debate that he has with David Atlee Phillips, and we'll get into that in a little while. But that's in 1977 at USC. There's audio transcription of that. He will then have a student. He goes on very eloquently, Phillips, talking about everything but the important things. The guy was a brilliant bullshit artist. And in fact, our next episode is going to be about David Atlee Phillips, because it transitions from this into Phillips. These episodes have a logic in terms of sequence, but the next one is going to be about David Atlee Phillips, who I believe is the mastermind of the physical plot. And I think that Lane agreed with me, and I think others do too. He was kicked out of two private high schools as a kid for alcoholism, hated the Kennedys, trained with the Bay of Pigs soldiers with E. Howard Hunt, who was very close with him in Guatemala and El Salvador, and the overthrowing of our Benz in Guatemala. And anyway, so we'll get into Phillips, but the thing about the Rosetta Stone, as Mark Lane calls it, of the assassination of Oswald being in Mexico City, the reason it's important is because that's where the frame starts. The framing starts September 28th. How could they know September 28th, the CIA, that Oswald was going to kill the president on November 22nd? It's completely insane, of course. They have cameras surrounding the embassy. They take photos. The photo is of someone else. They have audio, phone calls, the wiretaps of Oswald calling the embassy to get a visa. The plot that they laid out was he was going to kill the president, get the visa, flee to Mexico City, onto Havana, and on to Moscow. That was what they created. That was what they wanted to put down. And then the politicians, or in this case, Johnson, could deal with the baggage of that potential World War III, which a lot of the Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted. They felt we had, I know this sounds crazy, but you could read Operation Northwoods. We were talking about it with Tim Pool last week. These guys wanted to go to war now. And there's a certain logic to it. They're not completely deranged in that regard. They're saying the Soviets are going to have equal military strength to us in a number of years. And if we're going to deal with them, we might as well deal with them now. Whether you think that's rational or not, these are military guys from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that was their position.
It was the same argument in Korea that MacArthur wanted to go into China.
Yeah,
Get them now while they're weaker.
Yeah, it is not an insane argument. Whether you think you could survive a nuclear war is another argument. But Mark Lane didn't think that was possible. And in fact, Mark Lane was involved in the elimination of bomb shelters in New York because they had a whole bomb shelter program that was millions of dollars, cost the city millions and millions of dollars. And Mark Lane was involved in the eradication. There was a movement to say you can't survive a nuclear war. And he was part of that. World War III, nuclear war, there's no winners, blah, blah, blah. So that was one of his political causes, which he, I guess, succeeded in. I remember the signs for the bomb shelters everywhere in New York, but they eventually get away with the funding. And I think that was because of him. But Phillips is running the Western Hemisphere CIA out of Mexico City. Why Mexico City? Because you're not subject to the laws of the United States, but you're 2 inches away from the United States. So the plot was that Oswald went there to get a visa. And what it does is, Eric, it shows the CIA's hand on September 28th. There's the famous David Atlee Phillips, also known as Maurice Bishop. He's got a brother who writes oddly enough, his brother, Phillips, is the screenwriter of Thunder Road with Robert Mitchum, an obscure little tidbit. And he wanted to be a screenwriter. He later writes a book, Night Watch. They all want to be Hollywood screenwriters, by the way. I mean, E. Howard Hunt writes 50 novels. Every one of them wants to be a Hollywood screenwriter. Believe me, it's not. Believe me, it's not worth it. I've done it. It's definitely not worth it. Stick to what you know, which is spying. So Phillips and these people create this plot where Oswald is going to go to Mexico City and do all these things. Unfortunately, he never went to Mexico City. And what's the first thing Marina Oswald says when after the husband's arrested? My husband never went to Mexico City. Well, that's troublesome. So she is arrested, quote unquote, by the Secret Service. She's held incommunicado for weeks. She's not charged with anything.
You mean protective custody?
Right. It's protective custody, but she's not. In other words, they threaten her with a simple threat. We will take your children, have the state raise them, and deport you personally back to the USSR. That was the overall major threat that buckled Marina Oswald and made her dance to their tune. And I mean dance, because she comes up with crap that is off the rails. He's going to kill Nixon. He's going to hijack a plane to Cuba. I mean, they've got her saying stuff that is so crazy as to be laughable. And she, in a way, I think she wanted it to sound crazy to let the people know that she was being pressured to say this. You know what I mean, Eric? I think it was a signal by her.
Well, that ended just kind of like, no, I'm cooperating. I'm cooperating so much that I'm giving you more and more and more and more.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he never went to Mexico City. And the reason I mention that is because of a book called Our Man in Mexico. And Our Man in Mexico is written by Jefferson Morley. Jefferson Morley's entire book is about a guy named Win Scott, who I think was second in command down there in Mexico City. And the whole book is about Oswald in Mexico City. And now all of our media connections for JFK files apparently being run by the face of Jefferson Morley, who does not even get that the entire JFK research crumbles because of the Achilles heel of Oswald not being in Mexico City. And as a side note, it's not me being bitter. It's not me being jealous of Jefferson Morley. It's a load of crap. It's been going on for years. Morley believes that Lee Harvey Oswald was in Mexico City. And if he believes that, and he worked for the Washington Post, we've got a problem. That's just a side note about Morley. Nevertheless, I urge people to read the book for themselves, which is called Our Man in Mexico. Yeah, there it is. Jefferson Morley, forward by Michael Scott. talks about Oswald being down there and what he's doing, running around Mexico City. There's no photographs. There's no record of it. Sylvia Duran is the only woman, the only person who claims to have interacted with Lee Harvey Oswald. She was the secretary at the embassy, the Cuban embassy in Mexico City. She was tortured by Mexico City intelligence police to get her to confess that she indeed encountered Lee Harvey Oswald. And that was at our direction by our CIA. And there's documents to prove that, that maybe Morley hadn't read when he wrote the book. But nevertheless, Sylvia Duran was tortured unmercifully, this little woman, a cute little woman, into saying their bidding that Oswald had been in Mexico City. He was never there. And the reason it's important is because J. Edgar Hoover on November 22nd gets the photo of the phony Oswald coming out of the Soviet embassy. There's Sylvia Duran. This girl, they tortured the shit out of her. Yeah, that's why Oswald's in quotation marks there. But coming out of the embassy or the consulate was this guy. They photographed this guy and they sent it to J. Edgar Hoover and said they also had audio tapes of the phone calls that Oswald was making in Russian. This is according to the CIA, according to David Atlee Phillips, to the Soviet embassy to get a visa to go back to Moscow. Okay. Now, this is the guy they photographed, they claim was Lee Harvey Oswald, that they sent to Hoover on November 22nd. Then there's Hoover's famous phone call to LBJ saying the photo is an imposter and the audio tapes are an imposter. And sir, we have a problem in Mexico City. This is Hoover to LBJ. And we talked about that 2 weeks ago. The transcript famously put together by Rex Bradford and the 14-minute deletion, I think by some guy down at the University of Virginia, but that's a story for another day. The audio tape of the wiretap, Phillips says we destroyed it. However, he has a problem with that because there's 7 FBI agents who interrogate Oswald in the Dallas police station after the murder of JFK. 7 different FBI agents, Eric, who are quite familiar with his voice, right? All 7 listened to the audio tape that Phillips had not destroyed. He lied that he destroyed it. All 7 wrote a memo to J. Edgar Hoover saying that's not Lee Harvey Oswald on that tape. That's how we know it's not Oswald. And Hoover, who didn't listen to it himself, got this memo from the 7 of them and then called up LBJ saying that's not Oswald on that tape, which is fine, except it's from September 28th and they're framing Oswald 2 months in advance. That's why Mexico City is the Achilles heel of the Kennedy assassination. And either Morley is a complete idiot or he's working with somebody to overcome that. It's one or the other, because that's the case right there is in Mexico City, my friend. Okay, that being said, he begins to make a movie. He gets contacted by a guy named Emilio D'Antonio, a filmmaker. This is Mark Lane. And Mark Lane works with D'Antonio to go to Dallas. Now he's the lawyer of Marguerite Oswald. And they take a camera and they begin to go piece by piece to the different witnesses, almost all of whom were not called before the Warren Commission. These are witnesses that he gets on film. This becomes the movie of Rush to Judgment. And Rush to Judgment, you know, my British friends may know this. The Rush to Judgment is a phrase that goes back to a lawyer who defended an attempted assassin in 1800 of King George III. I'm going to stick my neck out there. I'm going to say famous kings for 100 and stick my neck out as to the origin of Rush to Judgment, the title. That being said, the book comes out selling like crazy, goes on the New York Times bestseller list. The FBI is losing their minds. The CIA is losing their mind. He begins to, just so I can read you a little snippet of what they were talking about. This is the dispatch from the CIA on how to deal with the book. says, our concern from the day of President Kennedy's assassination has been speculation about responsibility for the murder. Although this is stemmed by the time of the Warren Commission report, which appeared in 1964, various writers have now had time, Eric, to scan the published report and documents for new pretexts for questioning, and there has been a new wave of books and articles criticizing the commission's findings. In most cases, the critics have speculated as to the existence of some kind of conspiracy. Number two, this trend of opinion is a matter of concern to the United States government, including our organization. The members of the Warren Commission were naturally chosen for their integrity, Eric, experience, and prominence. They represented both major parties. Of course, there were only Southern conservative Democrats on there. As Mark Lane points out, there were no Kennedy Democrats on the committee. Just because of the standing of the commissioners, efforts to impugn their rectitude and wisdom tend to cast doubt on the whole leadership of American society. Moreover, there seems to be an increasing tendency to hint that President Johnson himself, as the one person who might be said to have benefited, was in some way responsible for the assassination. And then it goes on to explain how to fight back, discuss the possibility, the publicity problem with liaison friendly elite contacts, especially politicians and editors, pointing out that the Warren Commission made a thorough investigation as humanly possible. Letter B, this is my favorite. Employ propaganda assets to answer and refute the attacks of the critics. Book reviews and feature articles are particularly appropriate for this purpose. The unclassified attachments to this guidance should provide useful background material for passage to assets. Our play should point out as applicable that the critics are one, wedded to theories adopted before the evidence was in; two, politically interested; three, financially interested; four, hasty and inaccurate in their research; or five, infatuated with their own theories. In the course of discussion of the whole phenomenon of criticism, a useful strategy may be to single out Edward J. Epstein's piece for background, although Mark Lane's book is much less convincing than Epstein's and comes off badly where contested by knowledgeable critics. It goes on and on and on in massive detail on how to combat these people challenging the Warren Commission, Eric.
Yeah, I have it somewhere. I was trying to pull it up. Okay. Oh, well.
Okay, so that being said, now he goes out with D'Antonio to interview these people. Who's he interview? He interviews Sam Holland. He interviews Warren Reynolds. He interviews Orville Nix, J.C. Price, Charles Brame, W.E. Newman, Delgado, who was in the Marines with Oswald, Jane. Oh, go ahead. So, I see what you got there.
This is Warren Reynolds.
Okay, go ahead. Go with Warren Reynolds. That's a good one. Okay, that's okay.
And when he got to the corner there, well, he put the gun in his belt like this, and then he walked up the street.
And what did you do?
Well, I ran out to where I was even with him, and then I walked on the opposite side of the street, even with him. When he got to the service station, he went behind it, and I ran over and went behind it too, but I couldn't find it. I looked in the cars, under the cars, I couldn't find him.
Were you actually trying to catch him or just keep up with him?
Just keep up with him.
And what happened then?
Evidently he got away and the police came, and I went on back to work.
He has he's kind of a sketchy guy. He's a used car dealer, and he's got a used car dealership right where Tippett is killed at 10th and Patton over there. And I think it's still there. I don't think it's his, but there's a car deal. Last time I was there, there is a car dealership right there. And he explains to this guy how in the lineup, and this is not Mark Lane's footage, by the way. This is a local news Dallas footage of being interviewed. That's not from Rush to Judgment. Anyway, he goes into his basement and he explains how this is a couple of weeks after he couldn't identify Oswald as the guy fleeing the Tippett murder, and neither could Akilah Clemens, and neither could a lot of people. In fact, nobody could except Helen Markham, who was completely insane, which we'll get into in a second. But this guy, Warren Reynolds, couldn't identify Oswald as the shooter, that he was following whoever it was. He followed from the shooting. Now, Akilah Clemons will claim there's a tubby, short guy with dark hair and a thin, taller white guy. This is Akilah Clemons, but just getting back to Reynolds for a second, Reynolds will not be able to identify Oswald. And believe me, they wanted him to. He just wouldn't do it. So he goes down to that basement where this guy is going, the reporter, and there's a guy hiding in the corner with a rifle who shoots him through the skull with a rifle shot from like 20 feet away. He's hospitalized. He recovers, and he's interviewed by Mark Lane after he's recovered from the bullet to his head. He then tells the Dallas police he remembers that indeed it was Lee Harvey Oswald. That's why Warren Reynolds is famous for recanting, and then after being shot in the head, surviving and saying, oh yeah, that was Oswald, my friend. He learned his lesson. Now, Akilah Clemons apparently did not learn her lesson. She also lived right by 10th and Patton, and they said she couldn't see because she was black and of low IQ, so she couldn't see the incident. And she actually knew Tippit very well. She knew Tippit because that was his beat, was that street. And she said that two men shot Tippit. One was short and heavy set with dark hair, and the other one was tall and thin with blondish hair. And to me, this has always been Ruby and Crawford, who then fled in different directions, albeit the apartment for Ruby's apartment was within walking distance, by the way, of the Tippit execution. Ruby goes one way, Crawford goes the other way. She identifies the two of them to Mark Lane in Rush to Judgment. She says to Mark Lane in the footage, I don't know if you have any of the footage of her. Do you have any of her, or?
I don't on hand.
Okay. You could go to Helmer Greenberg to see all this footage if you want, by the way. Anyway, so in Rush to Judgment, she testifies to Mark Lane that she was threatened by Dallas police that she would get hurt if she talked to any newsman, which is the same for everyone. I mean, why are these people being threatened physically? Forget about all the people that died. You could look at Belzer's book, The Hit List, the top 100 who died. You know, you want to read Richard Belzer's book. But why are they being threatened? Why are they being physically threatened? Why are they so uncertain of their case that nobody should be able to talk to authorities or to Mark Lane or to reporters or anything else? There's a guy named S.A. Hollins, who you should, if you have any footage, it's pretty famous. S.A. Holland was over on the overpass. Now, S.A. Holland sees the puff of smoke over the picket fence, and he's one of the head railroad workers who's asked by the Dallas police to make sure that everyone up there is kosher. This is Sam Holland. I don't know if you could, if this is video you could run.
It's not video. It's just
there's a photo of Sam Holland. Okay. Do you have any video of Sam Holland?
I don't.
Okay. Anyway, so Sam Holland will famously say he's threatened also, by the way. His job was threatened, and he was threatened by the FBI. And he had been a career railroad supervisor. And he said, if the president of the, and I'm paraphrasing here, but I think I got it. The president of the United States is murdered and we can't talk about it. We might as well give this country back to the Indians. And then he pauses and says, if they'll even take it. That was his line in Rush to Judgment. And he kind of tears up during the interview. He kind of gets emotional with Mark Lane.
Mr. Holland, on November 22nd, where were you?
November the 22nd, I was standing on top of the triple underpass, waiting for the parade and the president's.
Now it's 12 minutes, so I don't know where.
No. Just show a couple minutes of it. Just show a couple seconds of it.
I arrived about 11:45 or close to noon. Two policemen was talking to me and asked me, one of them asked me if I would come back up there and identify the people that had any business or had a right to be up there.
They would be railroad employees.
They'd be railroad employees, and I told him I would.
And what was your position with the railroad company?
Track and signal supervisor for the Union Terminal Railroad. I've put in 41 years of railroad service in the signal department.
Did you look in any particular direction when you heard the shots?
Yes, I looked over to where I thought the shot came from, and I saw a puff of smoke still lingering underneath the trees in front of the wooden fence. The report sounded like it came from behind the wooden fence. And a policeman throwed his motorcycle down in the middle of the street and run up the embankment with his pistol drawn. He was running toward that particular spot. And also another motorcycle policeman right behind him tried to ride up the embankment on his motorcycle, and it turned over about halfway up the embankment. And he got off his motorcycle and left it laying there and run on over to the fence with his gun in his hand.
Where do you think the shots came from?
Well, I know where that third shot came from.
Where did that shot come from?
Behind the picket fence.
Is there any
close to the little plaza?
Is there any doubt in your mind that shot came from?
That's what we think it is.
He then will. I mean, it's actually a great, simple documentary. He just lets these people talk for themselves. He then gets up and walks with him across to the actual picket fence. At the end of this thing, he walks to the spot where he jumped over the cars with the other railroad employees and found the muddy footprints, found the cigarette butts, found the spot where the third shot came from, and where they saw a white puff of smoke. The Warren Commission famously said that no smoke can come out of that rifle. Well, the FBI contradicted them. They said, sorry to bother you, but we fired the Carcano, and puffs of smoke do come out of it in broad daylight, which is really. There was a number of things that the FBI undermined the Warren Commission about, which Lane also pointed out to the Warren Commission. Lane is the only lawyer involved who published a book, who also testified before the Warren Commission twice, and did so. And the transcript of that are fantastic. Now, keep in mind.
Did Holland testify in front of the Warren Commission?
Who?
Did they ask Holland, or did they have him?
No, that's the whole point of the movie.
Yep.
At the end of each of these incredible testimonials that he films, he says, "Did you testify before the Warren Commission?" He goes, "No, that's a funny thing about that. They just never asked me." And one after another, they all say the same thing. Now, regarding the shots and where they were, I mean, like 48 out of 90 people said they came from behind the picket fence. So again, his book basically goes after the Warren Commission in terms of contradiction, doesn't speculate about anything. It merely contradicts by saying stuff like S.M. Holland is saying here, who were not called. They weeded out, obviously, they weeded out anyone who had a contradictory opinion, a contradictory testimony to the story they were laying down. The brilliance of the Warren Commission. And by the way, Mark Lane was the one who coined the phrase magic bullet. It wasn't Cyril Wecht. It was Mark Lane. Mark Lane is responsible for almost everything we know about the weakness of the Warren Commission. And there is a lot of weakness in it. And he debates Wesley Liebler later on in 64 and 66. He debates Liebler, one of the Warren Commission lawyers, who becomes, there's always a payoff for these guys. He becomes a head of the law school, becomes a professor, the chief of the legal department of UCLA, and becomes a bigwig professor. And he gets all of his students to take, this is great, as an assignment, Liebler, Professor Liebler now, this is Liebler. Professor Liebler gets all of his students as an assignment to tear apart Rush to Judgment and find all its mistakes. Not
Mm.
one student could find a mistake in the book. And Liebler was like, damn you students, damn you. And anyway, so he's speaking at this event, Mark Lane, at UCLA, and Liebler walks in on it and demands the microphone. Maybe you could play a little bit of that first.
Isn't that right, Mr. Lane?
Yeah, if you go, maybe you could play a little bit of the first time.
This is the first one.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, cool.
That's right. Now, what I was trying to find out was how it got there, how the hole got in the photograph, why or how the license plate was obliterated. And this was the preliminary basis of trying to do it, to find out from Marina whether it was there at the time she testified before the commission. She said it wasn't. And we went on from there trying to find out how the hole got there. I'm very sorry to have to say that I was not able to find out how the hole did get there.
Okay, let me explain this.
I don't recall.
It's a little confusing. There's a photo of General Walker, a car in General Walker's driveway that they showed the photo to Marina Oswald, and she didn't know anything about it. She didn't know anything about her husband shooting Walker or anything else. When she is shown the photo again, the license plate is, there's a hole, a black hole is cut out of the picture where the license plate was. And she says to the Warren Commission, I don't know what that black thing is there. I don't know who did that, but it wasn't there. This is, look at the size of that black thing there. They showed this to Marina Oswald, and this is the second time she's seen it. She said it wasn't there when I looked at the photo. She's shown this by the Warren Commission. And the guy, Liebler, says, off the record, let's go off the record, right? So Mark Lane is saying, why did you go off the record, bro? What's so important about this? And he's now doing a dance in front of his own students, trying to get them to understand why he went off the record, claiming he doesn't remember why. And that's what he's getting agitated about. If you could play a little bit more of that.
Yeah, now I want to make sure the audience is hearing it in the background. This is not video.
Yeah, it's just audio. Oh,
I don't recall why it was off the record, because I'll tell you that it was not off the. All right, I'll tell you it was not off the record. Out of any, there are all kinds of reasons why lawyers go off the record. Her lawyer interrupted and wanted to make some remarks, and talked about it. And I don't recall whether it was I who asked it to go off the record, or Marina, or him, or any of the kind. But I can tell you this: that the reason that we went off the record, I don't remember what it was. It had nothing whatever to do with any. Just a minute. It had nothing whatever to do with any attempt to suppress any evidence of anything. Now, at this point, at this point, there are two ways in which that. Well, at this point, there's no way in which that question could be answered, because even if you open the original transcript in the archives, it wouldn't show what the conversation off the record was.
Can I just read the testimony here so that so there's no dispute about this.
Now look, Mr. Lane went on at length speaking about this. Now I'm going to say this. I came over here with the understanding that I would have the opportunity to respond to him, and I want to respond. Now, if Mr. Lane doesn't want to debate these issues, I'm going to withdraw from this conversation. I didn't come over here to listen to Mr. Lane. I've heard him before, and I want to make my statement about it, or I'm going to leave. And if you don't let me make my statement, all I can do is accuse you of bad faith in getting me over here and coming over here. You told me that I'd have access to the microphone, and I've got it. Yes, go ahead.
I would like to explain.
Okay, well, you can cut it right there, because this will lead to next year. In '67, this will lead to a formal debate between the two of them, which a couple minutes will play a little snippet. They get 9 minutes each in a formal debate where Mark Lane just destroys the guy. It's kind of ugly to listen to, but to his credit, I mean, Liebler is boxed into a corner because these are his students, and he thought that he could win this debate with Mark Lane. Mark Lane is an incredible attorney. I mean, the cross-examination of E. Howard Hunt by itself, when he does the Hunt trial, should be taught in law schools, how he destroys E. Howard Hunt on the stand.
Well, you could tell he's incredible because Buckley was careful with him.
Oh, boy, that was so interesting what he was doing with Buckley. James Hatfield is the attempted assassin of King George III, for my British friends. Anyway, he now is dealing with this book, and he's making a movie, and the people are ripping their hair out because the movie comes out, and now the movie's a success. but one of the great interviews that he does, I don't know if you have this one, is a guy named N.J. Daniels. N.J. Daniels is a former black Dallas police officer, and he is the cat who is standing with Vaughn, who is guarding the ramp down into the Dallas police station. Vaughn is the guy at the top of the ramp, and the ramp is like, I want to say 9-10 feet wide. If you go over there, you could take a look at it. Vaughn is assigned by the chief to guard the ramp. Don't let anybody by. So the guy talking to him, which nobody knew there was a guy talking to him, is a cat named N.J. Daniels. Very good-looking black dude with glasses, Eric. Very eloquent guy. He's a former Dallas cop. Goes on to do some other things. But the reality of it is he sees Oswald coming. He sees Jack Ruby coming down the ramp, and he says that Vaughn acknowledges him and that Jack Ruby has a giant bulge in his pocket, and it's obviously a gun, according to N.J. Daniels. And N.J. Daniels doesn't do anything because Vaughn, who's his friend as well, seems to know Jack Ruby and seems to say it's okay to go down the ramp. Of course, Daniels is never called to testify before the Warren Commission, and Ruby goes down and shoots Oswald moments later. And there was all kinds of finger pointing and different ways the Dallas police tried to explain that out of 800 police officers, 400 of them did not know Jack Ruby, as has been estimated by numerous officials, that Jack Ruby knew about half of the Dallas police force. I think there might have been 1,200. He knew 600 or some absurd kind of number. However, this guy is interviewed. He's another guy who's interviewed for the first time in this movie by Mark Lane, N.J. Daniels. You've got Akilah Clemens. You got Warren Reynolds, Delgado, Orville Nix, Brem, who was Charles Brem, who said the skull was right by his feet when the head was blown off. He was on the inside infield. You have all those different people now a part of this movie, and it is a problem, because every single person in the film testifies that they were never called by the Warren Commission, and they are absolutely eyewitnesses to history, Eric.
I'm not finding that anywhere. The N.J. Daniels interview.
Okay, well, how about a photo of N.J. Daniels? It's a guy with a thin tie and a white shirt with glasses.
I think I might have that. Hold on.
Okay.
I think it's another name. Napoleon Jonah. Okay, sorry, it's Napoleon Jonah. That might be the problem.
Okay, so this is a snap from the interview. He's being interviewed here by Mark Lane. This is the ex-Dallas police officer who was friends with Vaughn. People know who Vaughn is. Vaughn was the witness who, just said he didn't see Ruby sneak down the ramp. This contradicts everything that Vaughn says. This testimony by him, and you can see this on Helma Reinberg's website, where he's got each of the individual interviews from Rush to Judgment, or watch the movie yourself, because it's really a masterpiece of simplicity.
Yeah.
So there's that, and now he begins to get involved in testifying himself before the Warren Commission, which is really an incredible testimony, because he says to them, and this becomes a case that we discussed before, Seymour Weitzman and the others pick up the rifle, and stamped on there is the words German Mauser. And Weitzman owns a sporting goods store that sells rifles, and the other cops discussing German Mauser. Walter Cronkite announces for 2 nights on the CBS Evening News they found the weapon, a German Mauser. The FBI says a German Mauser themselves, and then magically it becomes an Italian weapon. It switches carbine. It switches caliber from 7.65 to 6.65. It switches from countries, as Mark Lane said, from Germany to Italy.
Serious question.
And, oh, I don't know.
I
Maybe
think I have that clip of
Go ahead.
him
Yeah, run
talking.
it. Go ahead.
I think this is the one.
Go ahead.
Questions. We have
this is
a
Buckley.
Dallas police officer who finds a weapon, says it's a German Mauser 7.65 millimeters.
Mr. Weitzman, is that?
Yes.
But he never examined it personally, did he?
Well, this is what else he said. It had a 418 scope. The bolt was worn in the back and was blue. He described the sling and the stock. That's a great deal of information to have, as the commission said, at a glance. Then we have Captain Fritz, who picked up the weapon and ejected one live round from it and said it was a German Mauser. And we have another Dallas deputy sheriff also saying it was a German Mauser. And now we have the Warren Commission reporting that the FBI the following day said that their records show that Oswald had purchased an Italian carbine caliber 6.5, and all of a sudden the Dallas police say that's what we found yesterday. Now, I examined that rifle when I testified before the commission. I don't know very much about foreign weapons. I know a little bit about American Army weapons, but it's a foreign weapon. But at once I knew it was not a German Mauser 7.65 millimeters because in large, clear letters, it said on it, made Italy, caliber 6.5. The commission implies that Weitzman must be some kind of a fool, and one, assuming he's a Dallas policeman, might accept that too quickly. But he was, in fact, a graduate college engineer. He owned a sporting goods shop where he sold rifles and said he's quite familiar with weapons. Well, then Weitzman testified before the commission. Is it not elementary to show him the weapon, the Italian car cannon?
No, other things are elementary, too. I think if I were a Dallas policeman prepared to devote my life to confusing you, one of the things I would do if I, if in the course of a working day I assassinated the President of the United States, is to simply not arrange for it so that a policeman that I wasn't sure of wouldn't be the first into this room to make that.
But you say if the police were involved in the assassination, which is not an assumption I've made.
Well, it's something about something about which you want to raise, quote, serious questions.
Well, certainly serious questions must be raised. When an old, corrupt, and intimate friend of the Dallas police force, when there's evidence given to the commission showing that this man, Jack Ruby, was the bag man for the Dallas underworld, paying off the Dallas police, there's a vast amount of evidence of that nature, which the commission, of course, discounted and never even considered. But in any event, it was an old friend of the police force.
Wow. Yeah, he testifies similarly to the Warren Commission about the rifles. He's paraphrasing it there, but his testimony under oath goes into detail about. They flip Weitzman, just so you know, that Weitzman forgets everything he just mentioned to go along to get along. Seymour Weitzman, as do many other people in this thing, terrified. They changed their testimony. Let's get into the three Negroes now. And I'm saying that because that's what they were referred to by CBS News. These are the guys, Bonnie Ray Williams and Harm Jarman and Newman. The three of them, you'll see a group of photos here. That's Bonnie Ray Williams on the left, Jarman in the middle, and Newman on the right. Newman in the middle, Jarman on the right. James Jarman on the right there. Hank Norman, in the middle. I think Norman and Jarman, it's a little confusing, but I think that Jarman on the right was a heroin addict who had a rap sheet, and they flipped him pretty quickly. He also went out to shoot dope after the assassination. Now, keep in mind, 48 out of the employees are outside the building watching the presidential motorcade from the outside, who never came back in. This is another lie by Henry Wade that hold on, this is for a little later. Sorry. These three guys are also outside, and they are taken to police headquarters. But just to address the thing that Oswald was the only one that fled, 48 people never went back into that building because it was sealed off. There was no roundup of every employee in the building. There were other businesses in the building, and people simply either hung out or went home. I just want to address that because Mark Lane addresses so many lies by Henry Wade, the DA, who will later be cited as years later, be cited as the most corrupt district attorney in America, having all of his cases overturned by the Supreme Court of Texas, by the way. But if you can go back to that picture, I just want to show you these different photos there. They are, okay, so this is the 5th floor window where Jarman and Newman were watching the motorcade from that window. And Bonnie Ray Williams comes down from the 6th to the 5th. They stick their heads out the window from the 5th, look up at Bonnie Ray Williams, who's on the 6th, eating his famous chicken sandwich with a bone in it, and his Dr. Pepper and his menthol cigarettes on the boxes that have chicken grease on the bag that they all claimed was Lee Harvey Oswald's lunch. None of that is true. And it was all Bonnie Ray Williams. Okay, so the Warren Commission tries to get Bonnie Ray Williams to back off the time that he left the 6th floor to go to the 5th. So the theoretical shooter would have time to get into the sniper's nest. And the best they could do, Eric, is 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes, whoever shot from that window got into position, assembled a rifle, got into a place, assembled the boxes, shot the president, and escaped, which is crazy. But Bonnie Ray Williams is the problem for that particular part of the story. So they keep working on Bonnie Ray Williams to roll back the time he went downstairs. And they make these 3 black guys do their dance. They're the easiest to flip because they're the most vulnerable politically and socially. And all 3 of them do a dance for the Dallas police and also the Warren Commission, you know, to fit into their storyline. But the reason I'm mentioning all 3 is all 3, when testifying before the Warren Commission, disavowed their quote unquote statements to the FBI saying, I never said that. And the Warren Commission said, you're saying the FBI made it up? And they're going, I'm not saying that, boss, but I'm saying I didn't say that. And they kind of like try to walk it back nervously while not, and clearly the statements in the Warren Commission are not the statements of a black guy in 1963 in Dallas. They're written by some eloquent dude who's writing this stuff. It's not even in their lingo, if you get my drift. So Bonnie Ray Williams is eating this chicken sandwich, watching the motorcade. What they want from these 3 guys and what they get from them is so crazy. And Liebler discusses this in the debate, which is why I'm bringing it up. They said that they could hear the shells hitting the floor when Oswald was doing the shooting. They said that the shooting was, what's that?
I've got that if you want it.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
As Dr. Bernstein pointed out, the commission concluded that the shots that killed the president and wounded the governor were fired from the 6th floor of the school book depository. It also concluded that they were fired by Lee Harvey Oswald, and it was unable to find any evidence of a conspiracy. No one seriously contends that no shots were fired from behind the motorcade, and the evidence of this is overwhelming and should be compared with the evidence that the critics set forth to suggest that shots were fired from the grassy knoll. There were 6 eyewitnesses that saw something in the window at the time the shots were fired. 2 of them actually saw the shots fired. 2 others saw the rifle. 2 others saw profile and movement that they immediately associated with the firing of the shots. I know of no such evidence with respect to the grassy knoll or anywhere else. There were 3 people on the 5th floor of the building. They were directly under the assassination window. They heard the shots, and they even heard the shell casings hit the floor.
What?
Because as a matter of fact, the floor was under construction at that time. It had been torn up, and there were strips, holes you could see right through the floor.
What'd you say?
They testified that the whole building shook when the shots were fired.
Whole building. Everybody, they're laughing at him. All right, you could stop it there. That's his own students laughing at him. I mean, that's a bad thing when your own students are laughing at you. He's referring to Arnold Rowland, 18, who claims to have seen a black guy in the window. Arnold Rowland was taken to, he said he saw 2 black guys in the window, which is what he saw, these 2 guys. And Rowland is taken to police headquarters. And when he comes out, he has now seen 1 white guy in a different window, according to police. So they flipped Rowland, this 18-year-old, and the guy they're talking about is Howard Brennan. Howard Brennan is a guy who's half blind. He's down on the ground, and he's the one who looks up, and he's the eyewitness of Oswald. And he actually says how tall. Okay, they're trying to explain how the description went out of Oswald so fast. This is a problem. How'd you get a description? How'd you send it out on all the police radios? Who told you? How do you get this description to look for this guy? Oh boy, we got a problem. Okay, so what they do is they go, Howard Brennan told us. Well, Brennan says, I saw the guy crouch down, which is, Eric can point out, is the only way you could shoot out of that window on the 6th. If you saw the window on the 5th, the ledge is much higher. But on the 6th, it's literally a foot off the ground. So on the 6th floor, you'd have to be on your knees in the corner of the window where there's a steam pipe. I know, and Eric's been there. You'd have to be hugging that steam pipe on your freaking knees to get a gun to shoot out that window, because the window is like 9 inches off the ground. Okay, so what does Howard Brennan see? He sees a man with a gun shooting out the window, and he says he knows the height and weight and look of the man from all the way down on the ground, looking up in the 6th floor window. Unfortunately, what Brennan didn't know is the only way to shoot out that window is to be on your knees, thereby never being able to have the actual height and weight of the potential shooter. And yet this is what Dallas police used as an excuse to put out the APB. There, let's take a look at Howard Brennan.
I don't have video. It's just
okay. Nice try. Good one. Okay, so Howard Brennan is the guy they trace this back to. That and the kid, 18-year-old Arnold Rowland, just so people know. But it's not enough. So they take these 3 black guys and they put this incredibly insane prevarication, and they'll say anything at this point. They just don't want to be involved, but they are involved because they're vulnerable. What they want is vulnerable people that they could use to create this narrative, because they have to create a narrative. The early narrative put out by Henry Wade is so different than the FBI's narrative a day or 2 later, that the FBI is now changing the narrative in real time. And Henry Wade is made to look like a schmuck because he has said stuff. I'll give you an example. There's plenty of them, but I'll give you a good one. Where was Tippit killed? He was shot in the theater by Oswald in the theater. Henry Wade initially puts out, this is the DA, that Tippit was killed by Oswald in the theater. When they point out later, it was a 10th and Patton, and he wasn't even around there. He backpedals, just because he looks like a schmuck again. The same thing with the gun, shooting the police officer. The other police officer attempting to shoot during the arrest. He claims that they have the gun and it matches, and he's got the bullet that has the hammer that hit it. This is what Henry Wade goes into detail about Oswald's handgun, that the hammer hit the bullet. It's got the mark of the hammer on the bullet, and he didn't know that the arresting officer testified that he put his thumb between the trigger of the gun and the bullet, and the trigger hit the thumb. So it couldn't possibly be on the back. And Henry Wade goes, oh yeah, okay, all right, we got to change that. In other words, all of them are full of shit, but the narrative has not been solidified yet. It will not be solidified until the warrant. Is this a video or?
Yes, I did find it.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I looked directly across and up, possibility at a 45-degree angle. And this man, same man I had saw prior to the president's arrival.
Sounds convincing.
Was in the window and taking aim for his last shot. After he fired the last or the 3rd shot, he didn't seem to be in a great rush, hurry. He seemed to pause for a moment to see if for sure he accomplished his purpose, and he brought the gun back to rest in upright position as though he was satisfied.
Well, it sounds like it's.
Well, it sounds like you saw exactly. What's that?
Sounds like a movie scene is so detailed.
Yeah, it seems a little unrehearsed, but Yeah, he's completely full of shit. He's just a pawn in their game. And you know, the wonderful thing is the fact that he's able to call out Henry Wade, who wants the case in the worst way because Henry Wade has other political ambitions. He has had, I believe at that point, 24 death penalty cases, and 23 have been executed. So the batting average that he has is like 979, whatever that is, 23 out of 24. That being said, he wants to get number 24 up on the big board. But there's going to be some other things that may be out of Henry Wade's control. Now, keep in mind, who's on the phone with Henry Wade every day? A guy named LBJ happens to be the president of the United States. Henry Wade is one guy, and the chief, Fritz, is another guy that LBJ calls. He calls up Crenshaw in the hospital after Ruby puts the bullet into Oswald. LBJ, you'd think he'd be busy running the country, but no. He is on the phone half the time with people in Dallas, telling them to end their investigation. They've got their man. Him and Cliff Carter. Is this a photo
Henry
or a
Wade.
video? What's this?
Henry Wade photo.
Oh, photo. I'm sorry. The LBJ and Cliff Carter are busy around the clock calling elements in Texas to wrap up. We've got our guy, wrap it up, stop doing this, shut the F up, stop issuing these statements, and it's nonstop. I mean, they make a lot of calls to Dallas to end this stuff. But I wanted to get to Helen Markham, because Helen Markham, again, is the only witness that they can get to identify Oswald as the Tippit shooter. And Helen Markham can't identify him in a lineup. He's all beaten up. By the way, they beat the living shit out of him in the theater. And he kind of took it like a man. He's got the black eye, he's got the bruised ribs. The shit's beaten out of him. And he says, famously said, "Kill the president, will you?" And then they beat the shit out of him. The story that he pulled his gun and tried to kill a police officer is another made-up story, or Wade would have put that on the list of crimes, which he didn't do because that was bullshit. Now, he's beat up. He's still pretty confident that he's innocent because he knows he didn't do it. And he demands an attorney. They will not give him an attorney. He names the attorney he wants. He wants this guy, John Apt, the head of the ACLU in New York. John Apt runs away. He goes upstate, goes on a fishing trip to avoid phone calls to be involved. This is how great the ACLU was. The ACLU did not want to touch this case with a 10-foot pole. Now, one thing I learned was that Mark Lane spoke to Ruth Paine 5 times during the making of this film. He didn't get her on camera, but he spoke to her on the phone. He tells the Warren Commission he spoke to her 5 times, and that made them very nervous. If you read the transcripts, they're not happy that Mark Lane is doing any of this, but talking to Ruth Paine 5 times. And the reason he talked to her 5 times is Ruth Paine insisted that Lee Harvey Oswald could not have gone to a firing range in the 2 months that he was living with her, because she knew where he was every time he was there. In other words, she knew his whereabouts. He didn't have a car, so she could account for every moment of the time. And she assured Mark Lane that he did not go to a firing range. Again, based on the theory that you got to keep up your skills as a rifleman, the Warren Commission assumed that he had gone to a firing range. Well, it turns out there was a guy who looked like him who went to a firing range repeatedly, was shooting at other people's targets. And the name that came up, it was one name, one word. It came up of this guy, and that was Frazier. Frazier. Remember the name Frazier? That was the guy they said was shooting at a firing range. Could it have been Buell Wesley Frazier? I think so. But that being said, Mark Lane talks to her 5 times about his whereabouts, and she says repeatedly that because she was a Quaker, there was no way she would allow a gun to be in her house knowingly. I don't know what it has to do with being a Quaker. Maybe that's one of their things. How do they hunt for rabbits, Quakers? What do they don't hunt because you're a Quaker? Any Quakers out there, please comment down below.
Maybe they store the gun outside of the house. I don't
Oh,
know.
I don't know the technical. I don't know what. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. But anyway, she said that he did not go to a firing range, and she told him in 5 telephone conversations that she could account for all the time he was there, staying with her. She doesn't know about the other times, but the times that she was with him. Keep in mind, the reason that's important is they claim that the rifle was there all the time in the garage wrapped in the blanket, Eric. You know what I mean? So in other words, unless he's got another rifle, using it to go to a rifle range, that rifle did not leave or even enter that garage, to tell you the truth. But nevertheless, the blanket is in there and there's nothing in the blanket. So nobody ever sees the rifle. It can't be identified. Now, getting back to Helen Markham, which I wanted to talk about for a second. Helen Markham is a wet-brained alcoholic. She's completely insane. She has a son. Is this video of her or?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
But then he got out of the car, slow motion. He calmly crawled out of this car, and he started around to the front of the car. And just as he got even with the front wheel on the driver's side, this man shot him 3 times in the wink of your eye. And then he turned and he was fooling with this gun, and he came back down 10th Street toward me. And he saw me, he stopped. And he looked at me, I looked at him. And he was serious. His eyes were big, and of course mine were too. And all it was, I put my hands up over my face like this, real tight, closed my eyes, and I stood there. And then I opened my fingers, opened my eyes, and gradually pulled him down. Well, I don't know what happened to him, but he just went off in a little trot across the vacant lot out here. And then the police came. They take me down to the city hall. And, of course, they got the statement. And then I identified him in the lineup.
Okay, none of that was true. Just so you know, absolutely cock and bull story. She completely has a nervous breakdown at the police station. She can't identify him in the lineup, even though he's the only one who's got a black eye and is wearing a torn T-shirt, and there's different age people around him. She still wasn't able to do it, has a complete meltdown about it. Now, the point that's related to Mark Lane is he calls her on the phone, and she completely contradicts herself to Mark Lane and sends all kinds of things. The Warren Commission says, you spoke to Helen Markham? And he says, yep. Oh, yeah, and I recorded it too, boys. And they went, what? You can't do that. He says, well, in the state of Texas, I think it's legal. I'm from New York. It's a one-state, whatever his legal thing was.
1 point consent or whatever.
1 point consent or whatever it was. He explained the legality of it. They bring in Helen Markham, and they play the tapes of Mark Lane talking to her on the phone in the Warren Commission hearing. And she says, I don't know who that is. And the guy goes, isn't that you? She goes, I never heard this woman in my life. And she goes, what about this man? She goes, I've never spoken to this man. Which is this man? Dude, the conversation is completely insane. She's clearly deranged, and they don't know whether to go on. They try, I think Rankin or the other Bellin tries like 3 times because they can't believe what they're hearing. So she says, isn't that you? And she says, that's not me. How could you say that's me? I never even heard this woman in my life. And she says, didn't you talk to Mark Lane on the phone? He testified here under oath last week that he spoke to you on the phone about these issues. She goes, I don't know who he is. A man called up, said he was a police officer. Mr. Lane impersonated himself as a police officer. And she goes, so you did speak to Mark Lane? She goes, I never heard of Mark Lane. Dude, it was like a Three Stooges episode. It was it's so freaking crazy that you come away with the fact that she's nuts. Now, I'm going to add to the fact she's nuts because Marguerite Oswald will go to visit her, as we mentioned in the Oswald episode. She will go to visit her, and she has a complete meltdown.
He got out of the car, slow motion.
Sorry, go.
Marguerite Oswald will go to visit her, and tried to get her testimony, and with Salandria and these other researchers, and she has another complete meltdown, and they walk away, and she says, please don't come back here. Her husband's there. They say, please don't come back here. The police will do something to us. We've been told not to talk to the press. They're completely shit-faced, terrified, Markham and her husband. But the teenage boy runs after them and says, I'll talk to you, even though I know the police are going to do something bad to me if I do. And the kid attempts to talk to Marguerite Oswald and the investigators. And he says, I know they're going to put me in jail, which is what they did. They took the kid. He was like 15, immediately put him in prison and put him on ice. So anyway, the whole Markham Tippit thing is an entire world by itself of them trying to frame Oswald for the Tippit killing. And they are pretty rough and tough about it because, again, it's two other people. And by the way, the people who observed the Tippit shooting, none of them see Helen Markham in the middle of the street doing what she described herself doing.
I don't know if you want this. This is Mark Lane talking to her.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tamp and Patton, Mrs. Markham saw Oswald approach.
Well, this man was walking along the sidewalk of 10th Street. This police car was driving very slow down 10th Street.
And what happened?
Well, the man kept walking, that's like I say, with his hands down in his head. I didn't pay him no mind, I didn't care. And this police car kept coming on, and finally he stopped, and the man stopped. And whether the policeman say, come over to the car, talk to him, I don't know, but he went.
Was he on the driver's side or on the other side?
On the other side.
And did he stick his head in the window?
Yes, sir. He folded his hands like this. He put them in.
It's not Mark Lane. Sorry, I just thought it might be. But
yeah, I don't know who that is.
Up on the window, and he leaned over.
No, the point of the matter is, every time she.
What do you remember about this?
Every time she tells the story, it's a different story. That's the point of the matter is, she is one of the weakest witnesses in the entire zeitgeist of the storyline. She's so crazy and so all over the map. But again, she's the only one that could finger Oswald for the Tippit killing. Now, many people have walked off the time, have done different time walks from the Early and Roberts rooming house to the 10th and Patton. Nobody could make it. I think Jim Ryan was the fastest miler at that point, who had done the mile in under 3 minutes. People have made that joke.
4 minute mile.
4 minute mile. Was there a 3 minute mile?
No.
Oh, okay. So the
four minute mile was the world record that they broke.
Anyway, so he interviews these different people, and then he gets into speaking around the world, and that's where it really gets crazy for Mark Lane, and the assigned people coming after him are trying to undermine him any way they can, trying to link him to the Soviets and the KGB, and unfortunately he's a Kennedy Democrat. But one of my favorite things is that Congressman Ford, who famously will move the autopsy drawing to the back of the neck, has a secret briefcase, Eric, given to him by the FBI with a secret panel so he could steal the documents every night and leave the warrant. Yes. Gerald Ford given a special secret attaché case by the FBI so he could take the documents out. He's the link. The CIA doesn't need a link because they have Dulles in there. But the FBI doesn't have a guy in there. That becomes Gerald Ford, and he has been given a secret briefcase with a side panel that opens up to put in the documents, and I think he's bringing them in and out. From what I gather, I don't think he's going to replace them.
Amazing. All right.
Yes, and that's the end of part one.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there's so much more to go into part two,
I'm
which will
sitting
be
here
next
going,
Tuesday. No. It's obvious that next Tuesday we'll pick up part two. This story is just too big to fit into one episode. It's already over an hour and a half old. So we had a whole where do you get into part two? Because it's crazy. Part two is even crazier. And then maybe we can have some of these videos figured out by next week also, which will be fun. If we can legally show them. I don't know which ones we legally can. But anyway, that's just part one. Part two, next Tuesday, JFK Files on Friday. So everybody at home will have enough JFK stuff to talk to their friends about at home.
Yep. Everybody should be well satisfied. We've got a lot of super chats that have come in. And Pamela Clifton saying, "Happy Tuesday, guys. I loved Mark Lane's film, Rush to Judgment."
Yeah, you know, it's just a simple punk rock stripped down documentary. Emil Antonio will later do one on the Weather Underground, which is what the second film he did that was famous, when they were underground behind a gauze curtain, not showing their faces.
Oh, I remember that.
That's Antonio. Yeah, it's the same guy. It's the same guy.
Leftist, a bit of a leftist then. Just like Mark. Yeah.
Well, he's a filmmaker. Who cares? All you want is the information. I mean, if you're not putting your finger on the scale and you're just getting the information, I don't care. You know, it's not a political documentary in terms of their opinion being in the movie, which it's not that type of movie.
All right. Pew Pew's been a member for 9 months. 9 months, baby. Looking forward to 9 years. Awesome. Thank you, Pew Pew. And celebrate, Pew Pew gifted 10 America's Untold Stories memberships, which we appreciate. George Toth said, "Brilliant shite as always." Thank you. Duche, "I can't understand 60 years later why the truth can't be told. It's not like anyone involved will hang at high noon."
It's not about individuals, it's about institutions. I hope you get that by now. I think most people get that. It's not an individual. Obviously, nobody's looking for the shooters at this point. It's about protecting institutions and the integrity of as I read from the CIA dispatch, it's about the integrity of the men and the Warren Commission, the integrity of America itself, the integrity of the presidency, and not to mention Ruth Payne, Marina Oswald, plenty of people still alive, bro.
There are some still alive, and if it does tear down the fabric of that, then every single thing after them,
it becomes a domino effect. Which it did anyway.
Well, it's like Henry Wade, right? As an analogy.
Yeah.
Once you find he's a corrupt prosecutor, then every single thing forward.
So many people, and people in Texas know this much better than me. I mean, people at Texas Monthly and some of the journalists there. I didn't really follow Henry Wade's career, but all of his cases were overturned and the men were freed. I'll tell you,
23 who were executed.
Right. That's why. That's why Mark Lane was so anti-death penalty. And I'll explain the case next week when we do this of James Richardson in 1967, because Mark Lane will be involved in the case of James Richardson, of which he wrote the book Arcadia, in Arcadia, Florida, 1970. I don't have time to go into it today because it's such a long story. But one of the first things he takes up after this in 1967 is the case of James Richardson, who was a black sharecropper accused of poisoning all 7 of his little children, murdering them, and is sent to the electric chair in Florida. And Lane gets involved in that. He writes the book in 1970. It's going to come back around in 1987, which we'll get into next week because it's a complicated story by itself.
Definitely. Pew Pew just saying hi to the Pew crew. Ah, Pew crew. All right. Pew Pew again. Mark, sir, never stop what you're doing. This is gold. Love your work.
Okay.
Anita Folger is a new member. Thank you. Pirate Ken coming in hot, $50. After Rush to Judgment, John Connolly called Mark Lane a journalistic scavenger, despite claims of being hit by separate gunfire other than JFK. But why? Wouldn't Lane have agreed with this? Or did LBJ or the deep state have an influence on him?
On Connolly? I mean, he said that Connolly was bringing up the worst McCarthyistic statements that he possibly could by calling Lane a journalistic scavenger. He got into a debate, a verbal sparring with Connolly, who did not want them digging up this information. Why would Connolly be upset? Well, he didn't want to sit up there in the front seat, did he? We know that much. And he wasn't happy about the JFK speech being in the women's building, so he made up a phony phone call to Kenny O'Donnell to prove that that Bruno, the advance man, had to have the speech at the trademark. Gee, what could Connolly have had at stake here? They're going to kill us all, he famously said. They are going to kill us all. John Connolly's famous statement as the bullets rain down.
I think you're going to love this one, Mark. Al Gonzalez. I met and spoke to Lane and Kunstler at a JFK symposium at the Village Vanguard, New York City, circa 1990. I later learned from an FBI friend that they were there too on assignment.
Yeah, no, everywhere. No, there is no event that Mark Lane goes to that FBI agents are not there. Every single event, his phones are tapped, everything is open. This goes on the rest of his life, every single year of his life from 1960. Probably before, because he's involved in this stuff up in Spanish Harlem. I'm sure they weren't happy about, the things he was doing up there. But this guy was a muckraker from day one. And that's what he did his entire life since he got out of World War II. It's nonstop. We're going to get into the second half of his life next week.
There's a lot in this.
There's a lot of stuff here, and this guy is the guy who is the model, for Kunstler and others and people of today. But we'll get into that next week.
JL is a new member. Thank you. George Orwell with $40. Love Mark's narrative style and Eric's deep collection of videos and pictures.
He's got a library back there. It's just not letting you see it.
Deacon Bob is a new member. Thank you. Hugo Skendrani, have you done or will you do an episode about Karen Kus?
Probably 20 episodes. So it's going to be a 20-part episode on her, whatever her claim to fame is. I think you're on the wrong channel, but we'll get into it. We'll probably end up doing one on Hillary Clinton if we stick around long enough.
Okay. James Wright with $9.99. Thank you. Oh boy. James Wright said, I wish Mark would offer to debate Ben Shapiro. He's been crowing about how nothing was found in the files, and that's because Lone Nut Oswald did it.
I haven't read the file, so I don't know. Neither is he. So how could two people debate about something they didn't read?
Yeah, that's just kind of
that's silly. He's a lone nutter. God bless him.
He is. Yeah.
He came around on Trump, so maybe he'll come around on lone nut stuff.
L. Tucker was a lone nutter forever.
Yes, he was a lot of people were lone nutters who have come around. They're just not hip to the literature.
Then there's O'Reilly, who's the reverse.
Right. Once you, it is the reverse. That's right. Once you read the literature, it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle. I'm sorry. It's just too much stuff. And it all starts with Mark Lane. Everything begins with Mark Lane. If it's not for Mark Lane, none of us are here doing this. There's no JFK files in 2025. He, literally reinvents the FOIA Act, even though it was signed by LBJ, I think in 1964, 65. Mark Lane really puts some teeth into it and begins to show journalists how to get documents.
All right. Scott Bimbo said, my mention last Friday of Kim Iverson was an attempt at sarcasm. Great episode today. Okay.
Okay. Well, I don't know who she is, but
you don't want to.
I don't want to. I don't know who these people are.
Stephen McMahon, Mark, do you have any contacts who can get Doge to check the income tax returns of LHO and
I don't have any contacts. Anything. I just the only contact I have is Hunley. The whoever goes in there. There's a politically sealed group, and they're not alone. Lee Harvey Oswald and Ruth Paine. There's other political operatives throughout, not American history, because it only starts in the late 20s and 30s. But there are people in there whose taxes are sealed in there. I'm interested in those too. But look, I'd like to see other people for that matter.
All right, Craig's Odd Spot. Along with Lane, who are three other on Mount Rushmore of OGs? Jim Jr. is not OG, but
no. You get into Salandria and probably Penn Jones and Sylvia Mager.
All right, there you go. The CCC video channel, Deep State Ops. Good work. Many people were told to use slump, as in slump forward, when talking to the media. Of course, they got John Connolly, as they did others.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
You slump forward.
Never heard that.
Boy, that's an obscure reference. They got John Connolly. I mean, Connolly, it's so funny because Connolly is so clearly hit by a different bullet that even Connolly says that. I mean, they were probably not happy about Connolly talking about being hit, separately because I hadn't invented the magic bullet. Initially, they've got 4 bullets. Then there's 3 bullets. Then there's the other bullet they find in the grass that's flown to FBI headquarters by the FBI agent, Barnett, I think his name was. So there's 4 or 5 bullets laying around.
Well, hell, they have multiple guns.
Yeah.
Multiple wallets, multiple jackets.
Multiple of everything.
2 Oswalds, yeah.
Well, when you're framing, and keep in mind the art of framing, because that's really what's going on here. This is an art. This is not something that's slapdash. The best police forces know how to frame a guy. It takes skill to frame a guy. I know that sounds laughable, but it's not. You have to be able to be flexible. You have to be able to intimidate. You have to be able to falsify evidence. And there's a lot that goes into a frame. And you've got, in this case, the reason it's confusing is you've got multiple agencies framing the same person. If that makes any sense to anybody.
Yeah, especially if they haven't coordinated very well and they are on a tight deadline.
Right. I mean, it's a
So
question of
things
just
fall
it's all
apart.
happening so quickly.
Right. When you also, it's such a big operation, you don't really want to brief people on what the hell's going on. You want to give a very limited scope of, you've got this and this and this and this, and you don't give them too much information. And then they can screw it up.
Well, Wade
because they
gave
don't
them
have that.
too much information. Wade was spouting all kinds of information. Why, I don't know. It wasn't necessary, but he did. And he's made to look like a schmuck as the story changes.
Which is fortunate.
Which is what he was.
Wow. Well, we're going to continue this discussion over on Locals. We do have a link in the description, unstructured.locals.com. You can go there and check it out. And that's somewhere where you can watch the show commercial free or ad free. And if you want, you can support us further. I will have a LBJ audio drama script dropping very soon.
Or they can come to the meetup and talk to us in person about the assassination, Eric, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you come to this meetup and you have a conspiracy theory, this is a good place to let me and Barnes and Eric and Viva know about it, because this is what we're going to be talking about. If you come or you don't come. If you don't come, we're still going to talk about it. If you do come, we could talk to you about it in person. So
talk to each other.
You talk to each other about it, for that matter, while you're reading the lasagna we're giving you. Plus, if you have some books, let me tell you something. The amount of books I've got from just this one thing here is absolutely insane. He wrote so many books. I mean, you got Rush to Judgment. You got Citizen's Dissent. You got The Last Word. You've got this book that I was telling you about called Arcadia, which is from 1970. And then you got Codename Zorro, which is him and Dick Gregory about. And you got Plausible Denial. Wait, this is my favorite. We're going to talk about that next week.
And there we
A
have
lot of books. A lot of books. Thanks to the people from the JFK Book Fund, by the way, who have made all of these books possible. Some of them, one of them I sent to Eric this morning, who wonderfully found a PDF really fast, was $130. It was a little bit too expensive to throw down to Amazon. But for the most part, these books are fairly expensive, so I appreciate the support.
Definitely. It always helps. Any kind of support helps. And we will head over to Locals and catch up there.